I have a feeling, Mike, that we've done everything on our list at this point, on our
He
agenda.
wants to do the warrant article.
Oh, the warrant articles, yeah.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Unless there was something we're supposed to do at the end of the meeting,
Yeah,
close
we
the
have to-
annual,
Warrant at the close of business, yeah, about
Rich just sort of reminded me that he and our article we put on the traffic study, the intersection of South
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah.
and didn't include that. So
That'll go on.
And I'm actually going to withdraw, after talking to the town moderator. There was an article, I was looking for a non-binding referendum to get a sense of what the town meeting would like, and it's the moderator's opinion that these type of articles, plus this is a very lengthy warrant, there's a lot of debate that's with that. He said he would work with me, and there's a proper way we can do that, so I'll withdraw that.
is that the one about expanding the Board of Selectmen?
3 to 5 members. I'm going to withdraw that request.
And the other one that I made a note of to ask about, Mike, was I thought that we were gonna set aside some money for the townwide master plan. We have an incentive in the land acquisition agreement to do it.
I spoke to Sarah Raposa about that. She said the planning board was going to meet and discuss that Monday night, but because of the storm, they didn't. She said they are planning to meet next Monday. And they had, that normally would be a planning board function. If you want to,
Can you put a placeholder on it?
if you'd like to, if the board wants me to put a placeholder, I
I mean,
would.
I think it behooves the town to do that townwide master plan, because the land disposition agreement provides us an economic incentive. I think it's a 2.5% bump in the sharing that the town gets.
Is that for
at
a
the expense of
hospital
the
master?
state.
We are doing a hospital master plan.
You have to do a townwide master plan.
Townwide master plan.
And so that, just from the standpoint of the return on anything that gets sold at the state hospital, it seems to me it makes sense to spend the money now. When we have that, I think it's a window of a couple of years, is it, Bill, that we have to do it?
Actually,
Didn't you have the-
yeah, the hospital plan will be considered an allowable cost, which can get recovered, based on a percentage of acres that's resold. The townwide master plan, if it incorporates elements of the hospital master plan, the only requirement time-wise is that you have to have it completed before you sell the first piece of property. So whenever you're going to sell the first piece of property, whether it's within 2 years, and you have a 2-year limit to get it done. If it's 3 years, you have a 3-year limit to get it done.
And what are the incentives for selling it within 2 years and 3 years? Aren't they like 10 or 15%?
Well, yeah, but the interesting thing about this one, though, is that this one stays. I mean, the other one's expired. So you have a 10% incentive if you sell within 0 to 2 years. You have a 5% incentive if you sell from 3 to 5 years, and then they're gone. And then those incentives go away. So theoretically, if you were to sell, say, in year 3, if you picked up the 2.5% for the master plan for the town, and you picked up another 2.5% for, I'm not sure I remember which one it was, that's starting to all run together now, but you could essentially pick up at least 5%, have 55% for any sale at any time on the rest of the property. So, I mean, there's a way to with a little bit of planning, to pick up some incentives.
And we could I think, the way that I think of it is that we can get a master plan paid for by the state, basically, if we do it.
Yep.
And so that it makes sense for us to do it.
Well, I think we had this big discussion before. We've had it a bunch of times. I know you're hammering home the master plan thing. The only caveat I'm going to say is I am not the least bit interested in slowing down the hospital process, waiting for a master plan. So if we can end up getting a committee of people that want to do that, that's great. The state hospital people aren't going to do it. We need to focus on the state hospital and get that damn thing done and get the property sold and move forward. So if we can end up scaring up a bunch of people to get a master planning thing done and somehow do it, that's great, but I'm not the least bit interested in sacrificing the redevelopment of the state hospital for a town master plan and having it, fart around here for 5 or 10 years while we get this big, grandiose 500-page report done about the plan for, master plan for the town of Medfield, which we already know what needs to be done in town, you know, just have a fancy report. So that's fine, but I'm not gonna get, I don't wanna, I really don't wanna see the state hospital project get hijacked.
I don't either.
And I hope that's
The whole idea
really
of
clear.
doing the
because,
townwide master plan is to capture that
And it-
2.5% extra that the town can get from any
That's right, and
resales
if
at the
it,
state hospital.
and if it's not done, it's not done. You know what I mean? I really wanna put my foot down about this, that
Well,
we're
but
not
if
gonna
you-
slow it down.
Well, I don't
You
think
know.
anybody's talking about slowing it down,
Well,
Mark. I
but
think
that's
what
how
you wanna
things
do is,
happen sometimes,
if
you
you
know?
wanna get the money, the purpose of the money is to hire the planning company to do the plan for you, basically, and not, I wouldn't do the master plan on the backs of volunteer residents. I would just hire somebody to do it for us, pretty much. I think you're right that we have a good idea about what we want and what we need to have done, and so let's, just get a planner in and
Mark,
execute.
Mark, I would just point out, Mark, that the way the incentive clause is written, you need the hospital master plan first.
Yeah.
It has to be incorporated into the town master plan. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't see it taking away from the activity being
And
spent
that's right,
on
I wanna make us, I would like to see it perfectly clear, so we don't get it all muddled, so that a couple of years from now, we've changed direction on things, so, because it's happened before, where we've kind of lost our way, and then taken us a while to kind of regain our footing.
The other concern I have a little bit of, are we gonna spend $200,000 to do a master plan and get 10,000 back as 2.5% of the land sale? Because if you sell the land up there, it seems to me you're not gonna get a lot of money for it because you've got all the cleanup costs to deal with. So if you assume the developer is gonna be responsible for the cleanup cost,
Well,
I don't think you're gonna get, you're not gonna come away with $10 million,
no, but what I would point out is that whatever incentive you get there is forever. It's not, I mean, it's not something that expires in 2 years or expires in 5 years. I mean,
Yeah, but sometimes incentives are not worth the price you pay for them. If you're gonna pay $200,000 to get a $10,000 incentive.
well, again, not to be argumentative, but you could also say the same thing about rushing to get anything done within, a year or 2 years or whatever so, speed is not necessarily in and of itself of value, but again, I mean, you're doing, I think, half the work or more than half the work for the town-wide master plan if you look at the statement of work that you've written for the guys that are doing the hospital master plan. So it seems to me that whoever you hire to do the town-wide master plan will be able to incorporate about half of the stuff that you've done or 3/4 of the stuff that you've already done. They're meeting with all of the committees, they're meeting with all of the town departments, they're putting all those things together. You have a housing production plan that again, I guess the planning board and the zoning board of appeals or whatever have to review that, comment on that, but we saw a presentation on that last week, 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, the elements are there. And, I mean, I will freely admit that I don't know what constitutes, an acceptable master plan, or who even rules on whether the plan is acceptable or not. I mean, who makes the decision?
As
I
well.
mean, if it's the town that makes the decision on what the master plan is, then
We can have
if
a
you
very
have a
simple one.
500-page document or a 100-page document.
As I understand it, there are 9 elements to a master plan. One of them's transportation, one of them's housing and economic development, one of them's land use, I forget what the others are, but.
And I would point out that the transportation study is one of the things that your consultants are quoting now as part of the activity that they're doing for the hospital. That's probably the most significant traffic impact that you're going to have in town. You guys have done studies already now based on the traffic lights and the Roach Brothers, everything else. So I think some of the work has been done. So I think you should be able to get away at a reasonably economical cost for this thing and get it done within a reasonable time period and not impact what you're doing for the hospital. I mean, again, that's my opinion, but I mean.
I always say, many towns plan, Medfield does.
Here you go.
Well, Mr. Harney,
It shouldn't be forgotten that the town meeting that approved the purchase of the property was assured that the selectmen would come back to the town meeting for the town meeting's decision as to what should happen up there.
absolutely.
Now, it may be that the town will agree with Mr. Fisher that the property should be sold. It may also be that the town meeting will decide that the property shouldn't be sold.
Sure.
That the town, and we have to give a clear, figure supporting, data supporting position on both of those accounts that the town meeting can choose from. And so, I mean, I think we have to test our assumptions that the property will be sold, or all of the property is more or less up for sale.
I guess
Rather
Scott
than-
Caldwell was right when he said the town should have decided what was going to be done with the property before we bought it.
But that didn't happen, Mr. Sullivan.
It didn't, but, you know, I think the assumption
You know,
was that there was going to be some sort of development there to address several needs the town has, including how do we pay for the costs associated with.
Well, you pay for it like you pay
Dem-
for anything else. You pay for it through taxes. And if the townspeople sees the value of this property left largely open with some modest development and use of some of the buildings that are going to be remaining there for housing, then that's something the town meeting should be asked and will decide on.
is
It
the
may
town
well be
meeting
this is a
asked?
slam dunk for development on a large scale. I don't know. But
Oh, I don't know.
I do know that there's a strong segment of the community that values open space and values giving
And we have
something of
tons
great
of it.
value to generations yet to come. So we'll see. But we shouldn't presume on the town meeting's outcome.
I would never presume on a town meeting, having been here 40 years now, so I would not
It's
do that.
absolutely, absolutely certain that the town meeting is going to have to decide what happens to the state hospital. The planning committee is going to present the data, and the town will make up its mind as to what, and they'll probably have a recommendation too, I would imagine, but the town's going to make up its mind through the town meeting as to what it wants to do.
And I would-
Absolutely.
And I would hope the
Mr.
town
Chairman,
would make
you're
up
right,
its
but-
minds on facts and not fear.
The direction that you start your journey in determines where you're going to end up. And all I'm asking is a fair start to the journey, that we get the data on both accounts. And that's what I've urged on Mr. Nolan as chairman when he has these consultants come in, that they be asked to do a fair and honest appraisal of
Yep.
choices available to the town.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it makes sense to have a warrant article to provide the money for the master planning. We can try to figure out, once we have the money approved, if we do get it approved, as to when we would execute and when we would use it then. And we can figure that, maybe, as Bill says, maybe you want to do the planning for the hospital first and have the townwide master plan set to go next. I mean, I'm not a planner, so I don't know how to do this stuff, but I think the first step is to see whether the town is willing to approve the money for it. And then, given the fact that we know that we have this 2.5% increment that we can recapture from resales, if resales happen,
I think the 2.5, well, I think the 2.5%, it should not even be considered. I think it's irrelevant because A, if we don't develop the property, there is no 2.5%.
absolutely.
And B, if we have to recoup the cost of cleanup in the sales price,
Right.
it's not going to be a big sales price. So I
may
think
not be.
if you need the master plan, fine. But I don't think you should talk about the 2.5% reimbursement as being relevant to the decision whether we need the master plan. We either need it or we don't. And the 2.5% is going to be insignificant, in my mind,
Yeah.
as a factor.
I think in general, it makes sense for towns to have master plans of that sort, to lay out all the data and set the agenda for what the town wants to do, in what order, in what place. To me, that makes sense to have that type of plan in place. So I would encourage the warrant article for the money for the master plan process.
Can I just I want to point something out here. Under the prior 440-unit plan, there were 17 home lots at the front of the property that were going up for sale that, and again, I'm not advocating a piecemeal or an incremental approach here, but that's one of the things that the consultants are quoting on now the Master Planning Committee is looking at. But the land at the front of the property and the land to the left-hand side abutting parcel A2, there is no cleanup required on those properties. The problem is, of course, that you have buildings behind them, but those pieces of property were tremendously valued under the old plan.
I believe there was going to be a mix of affordable in there. They were going to include affordable units.
Yeah, but they were assessed at somewhere in the neighborhood of, I want to say, like,
175,000 a lot, which I always thought was very low, but for a single-family lot in Medfield, you can't get one for 175 now. Even
so
then, you
those
couldn't get
17
it.
acres, I mean, are worth something. They will be worth something. If those were the only acres that you sold, they would still be worth, I think, a significant amount of money. They will also have the restored C&D area alongside the vista looking over the, over the river and everything else. So that piece of the property is worth something. I'm not suggesting that you need to sell incrementally or that you should sell incrementally, but I'm just saying that it is there, and that property is worth something at the front. It may well, in fact, be worth enough to pay for the rest of the property if the appropriate development were to go in there. But I just want to mention that. Pete, one other thing, if you read the current existing warrant article for the master plan for the hospital, it ends with, or any other, the language, Mike, you're more familiar with the typical, boilerplate at the end of these clauses, or any other purpose that the selectmen see fit, or whatever you could conceivably cover after you've covered the master plan for the hospital in there. There could be funding still
Use the
within that
money
same
for the
article.
townwide master plan.
Yeah, you could
You
still
know,
cover in that same
Yeah, I
article.
wondered about that, but it really is an article aimed at the state hospital, not the townwide master plan, so it just didn't strike me that it fit within the rubric of
I just pointed
that
that.
heading. So is there consensus as to whether or not that article should be part of the warrant?
I'm going to agree. I don't think we should do anything that's going to take away from the efforts of the state hospital. I think planning is very important. I don't think anybody will argue that. But I don't want that used to delay what we're doing with the state hospital. If you want to put an article on and we leave it up to the townspeople to also simultaneously, I think is what you're saying, have a townwide master plan going on, while at the same time we have a committee looking at the state hospitals. Are you looking at two simultaneous committees?
I would leave it up to Christine and Sarah to manage it in the way that worked best for the town. I think ultimately the town should have a master plan.
Right, good.
And there is a financial incentive built into the land disposition agreement for the state hospital, where we actually get more money back if we do one. So to me, it seems to make sense, since we should have one in the end regardless, and since there's this financial incentive built in the land disposition agreement, it makes sense to proceed so that we have the townwide master plan prior to we start selling things off at the state hospital. It's going to take a while to sell things off at the state hospital, if we ever do sell things off there, but it's going to take a while to do the master plan too. And so, to me, it makes sense to appropriate the money now, get the master plan done, and I don't know, I mean, I absolutely don't want it to delay the hospital work, but, we've got people that can manage this for the town, and we would just create the money, and they would hire the planners, and they would tell us when to go ahead with it.
Okay, are you fearful that the townwide plan will somehow delay the...
Yeah, I'm worried about it's going to sabotage it, and I'm also worried about, I'm very concerned about resource allocation. We've talked about it a couple times. I'm very concerned about Christine, obviously Michael, and Sarah being stretched too thin. Their charge right now is focusing on the state hospital. While we could hire a consultant to do a townwide master plan, obviously they still need to work with key figures within the town. So, I'm concerned. I don't understand how the process works, but my fear is that, that we get Christine and Sarah getting dragged in two different directions, and just through no fault of their own, the state hospital just starts slowing, grinding down, slowing the process down, which I just don't want to see that. And I don't have an issue with the town doing a master plan, providing we can afford it and we can somehow figure out how to make it work in the budget. Because once again, we throw around money here like, another couple $100,000, because it's easy for us to say, until Michael has to try to figure out how, in the warrant committee, how they're going to balance the budget, without asking for an override, operating override. But what was the other thought I was going to say? But if the planning process for the master plan for the town is going slower than what maybe some of us would like to see, I don't have a problem with that. I want us to be very clear. At least my preference is that the state hospital has to be the number one focus, besides them just doing their regular jobs every day, which is like a million other things going on. And I just don't want to see it, like I said, the master plan just, gumming up the work, so to speak, because it's another thing. Because once again, I know we all feel good about, we're gonna have a plan, now we got a plan. But, most of the plans you get, a lot of times people, they don't even look at or read. It's this big, long thing, it's got fancy graphs and pictures, which is all great, but no one ever uses it. I get a lot of reports at work and stuff that are beautiful things that consultants have spent money on, and you glance at it quickly, and then you just go about doing your regular business like you always do. Because you kind of already know what's going on.
I don't know what the number is. I'm not a planner. I don't do, I know that Sarah at one point was looking for $25,000 a year for 5 years from the Capital Budget Committee, she told me. So I think that she was thinking that it would cost $125,000, but I don't know. I'm not a planner. I know that we're talking about 100,000. I think 100,000 was the number that the planning committee used for the state hospital planner, and they've gotten one person who said that it was too little already. Told them that they didn't allocate enough money.
Yeah.
I don't know, Mr. Thompson?
I did speak with someone that, in my company, that is involved in master planning. He thought that, I think this budget was 100, was it 100K? The plan
The
that,
state hospital. I think.
yeah. He thought that both could be done within 100K, both a
Great.
a town master plan and the state hospital plan. So he does have a significant amount of experience with municipal master plans. And
Do you
so
have
I-
experience with Medfield?
Yeah, he saw the RFP come out. I mean, he hasn't worked in Medfield, but he did say that, you should be able to do a townwide master plan easily within this budget and
Oh, good.
the plan for the hospital, for what that's worth.
Yeah.
Well, maybe
Well, that's
then if you
great
expand
information.
the one on the hospital master plan to include the town, the option to.
Yeah, so
Work
maybe
on
somebody
the
could look at that,
state
if they
master
find that
plan.
if they're comfortable with the firm or something.
Maybe what we ought to do is hold on it until the planning board's had a chance to meet Monday and give you their take on it. So, if you want to, I can reserve a space.
Sure.
I think you
Either
should
put it in
reserve
or
a
put it,
space.
keep it out.
And I suppose it
You
is
can always
good,
withdraw it later on if you
Yeah.
want to.
I suppose it's good, we do need their feedback, because obviously they are the planning
Yeah.
board.
Just want to throw out, the schedule for the hospital master plan is to complete by March of 2016. So they're talking something like roughly a year. And that would be all the way up through the bid package going out for developers, what they're
Yeah, I mean,
calling Phase 3. So the hospital plan, if all goes according to plan, would be complete within a year.
But their results are really going to be due in August, this August, I think. I mean, I think they're going to have their ideas presented to the town at that point.
Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 2, I believe, are the recommended uses as the end of Phase 1. Phase 1 is supposed to have all of the financial analyses, all of the pro formas, all of the market studies done. Oh, that was the other 2.5%, Mike, was if we did a comprehensive market study. And Christine was looking at whether we might even have gotten a head start on that already.
Who did a marketing study?
Jones Lang
Well, you had
LaSalle.
Jones Lang LaSalle who did it for DKM. You had FXM, I think, who did it for the town. I don't know if Bobrowski and his 40R stuff or whatever way back when would help qualify or not. But there's some things that are perhaps get a good head start on that 2.5%. And you're right, 2.5% is nothing, but 2.5% and 2.5% is 5%, and there's another 2.5% for some potential zoning, which brings it up to 7.5%. So, I mean, you're almost back to the incentive that you would have gotten for hurrying up and selling something within 2 years.
Mary Beth Clancy at one point said that we already had the market study because we could use the Jones Lang LaSalle one, but then DCAM kind of backtracked on that. But I would imagine you could hire Jones Lang LaSalle for very short money to reissue it to Medfield.
Yeah, one of the suggestions I made too for the interviews with the consultants is to discuss what they plan to do for their comprehensive market analysis and if what they were doing under whoever we select to be the consultant for the master plan for the hospital, if they did something that might qualify as a
Well,
comprehensive.
don't you need a marketing study to inform you as to how the land should be zoned?
Well, that's what I'm saying, Mike. I mean, the question is though, if it's missing one element or two elements, that would help it qualify for the state incentive, then we ought to make sure that that's in the description of what we're having the consultant do, you know, for that task.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all I'm saying, you know, just plan ahead. And if you gotta do 2 more steps and it qualifies and gets us 2.5% essentially for something we were gonna pay for anyway,
Right.
then why not do it?
So we're resolved on the master plan at this point, are we? That we're gonna.
Well, we'll hold a place for it now and then find out what the planning board,
And then,
how they want to address it.
the next one, that we should, Richard's withdrawing his one about the selectmen going from 3 to 5 members. I had suggested that we put in one about whether the town should adopt the Community Preservation Act. And I guess Mike put it here on this list to see if Richard and Mark want
I did talk to Mark Sorrell
Put
about
that in.
that, because I think it's a 2-step process. I think you have to, the town meeting has to vote to put it on the ballot,
Yeah.
and then it has to be voted on by the voters. Is
Sure,
that your
because
understanding of it?
because it's.
to, I don't know, I haven't looked at it for a
Makes
long
sense, because
time.
you're changing the tax.
And I just know that at one point, we had it before the town meeting once before, and it got voted down.
Yeah.
So we could just copy whatever we did the last time.
Okay, let me check with Mark on that if you, to find out what that says. I know it has to go, I'm pretty sure it has to go on the ballot for the voters to vote on.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's not just
But
a
it
town
did
meeting
come before
action.
town meeting.
Yeah, I think that might have been put it on the ballot, I think.
I don't
And
know.
then you also, at that time too, I guess when you put it on the ballot, you need to decide whether it's gonna be 1%, 2%, or 3% increase in the tax levy or surcharge on the tax levy.
Yep.
But if you want to put it on, I'll find out what the procedure is as to how to handle it. There's some, I know last year was it, they wanted to hold off until they could do a campaign to sell it to the town.
There was one person that wanted to hold off.
Yeah.
I asked that person if they wanted to hold off this year, and never heard back, so I think it makes sense to just go ahead and put it on, but I'm, obviously, the 3 of us.
Yeah, well, I think the thing too, you gotta think about the warrant committee. Yeah, I think you gotta chat with them to see what they think. I mean, that's very important, what their take on it is.
It's going to be interesting. I understand the school budget's up over 5%,
Ooh.
which is going to be more than all our new revenues. And then you've got the public safety building, you've got the master plan for the hospital and/or the master plan for the town. You've got the pocket park, you've got, you've got a 200,000 increase in your pension cost. We haven't got our health insurance figures yet. That's probably going to be an increase there, and that's a $5 million budget, a $3 million budget.
One good thing, Mike, is that last year we had 800,000 in the operating budget for the plans for the public safety building that we put into the operating budget. We won't have that one this year.
Right, but I think only 100,000 of that came from the tax levy. I think the rest was either from stabilization fund
Oh, was it?
or, other sources, so it was limited as to,
So that doesn't have such
you
a
don't
big
recoup
impact.
the whole
Yeah.
850, it might be 100 or 200,000, so.
My only concern, I think Community Preservation Act makes sense, and if we had had that from the last time, we would have saved this town a bundle of money on things like Red Gate Farm and others which we could have used it for.
Right, yeah. I think-
And we've had to pay that, and that's increased our taxes. My fear is, in order to convince the town to do this, and you have to convince the warrant committee, and you have to convince the town to raise that so they can understand, there needs to be some type of a groundswell, some type of a group that's going to do some research and explain that. If we just bring it up, my fear is we're just gonna bring it up blank, and it's gonna go down to defeat.
It's not that complicated an issue to me. I mean, it's just, you pay ahead. If you believe that you're actually gonna spend the money on those 3 categories, the historic preservation, the open space and recreation, and the affordable housing, if you believe that you're gonna spend money on those 3 categories in any time in the future, then it makes sense to spend the money, put it aside ahead of time. And why does that make sense? Because you get state matching monies. That's
Right.
the only reason that you do it.
It's gonna
It's
save
because
you
you
money
get
in the
state
long
money.
I agree. My fear is, we're not gonna be able to present that in such a way, but I will support you to put that on, but somehow we need to get some support and people to go before the warrant committee, speak before town meeting, and kind of be the advocates for this. I don't see that right now, unless we contact the two individuals that kind of spearheaded it last time.
I contacted one of them and haven't heard back, as I say.
It makes sense, it saves money in the long run, so I'll support that to put that on, but I'm just fearful, unless we can really get our act together on this, it's gonna be a hard sell.
There's an excellent website that people can get all their
Yeah.
questions answered at. And I don't think it's that complicated to explain to people, so.
I'll second you on that, too. Put it on the
Mark,
warrant.
any interest?
Nah, I mean, it's fine to put it on, I'm not too excited about it.
Okay.
You know, I wasn't years ago, so, when I was on the warrant.
So we'll put that one on then, Mike. And then the next one is you have down for us to look at is to see if the town will vote to grant the Board of Selectmen authority to research, develop, participate in a contract or contracts to this one's coming off. That's the electricity aggregation.
Yeah, I talked to Maria after I talked to you today, and she said she doesn't want to put it on this
Yep.
year.
And then the other one was about dogs in the cemetery, and I think that is not going forward either.
Unless you want it, there's been no petition.
Yeah, no one's asked me to have it be put on, so.
Okay.
And what about the issue of the traffic study? The chief is gonna have to get some,
He's going to get some figures on it.
Yes, you're gonna end up to South Street and, South Street
27.
27, yeah, because we talked about that.
We'll add that one.
All right. Got plenty of things to work
So
on.
that's for the intersection of South Street and Route 27?
correct.
Cool. Anything else we need to do tonight, Mike?
I don't believe so.
Mr. Thompson wants to talk about his Medfield State Hospital Committee. I forgot about it, John, I'm sorry. We could have taken it up earlier. You could have gone home.
This fall, when I was up visiting the site, watching the cleanup, there was a manhole that was overflowing like a fountain up at the state hospital. And I was standing with Bobby Kennedy and John O'Donnell from DCAM, and John O'Donnell looked at us and said, that manhole overflowing like that isn't something I can help you with now, because that's on town property. And after that observation, Bobby and I thought, we really should try to organize and manage a Buildings and Grounds Committee. So I'm asking if Bobby and I could set up a Buildings and Grounds Committee for the hospital. This would not be anything to do with planning. We wouldn't be interested in discussing future buildings, where they would go. This is purely
Just
a maintenance committee
thing.
to, when you hear about a concern at a building, he and I could talk, understand where the keys are. I'd like to invite someone from the police department and someone from the fire department. I would try to hold the meetings here during the day, on a weekday, maybe around the lunch hour or something, where we could have a monthly meeting and talk about what the needs are up there as far as just pure maintenance and grounds. Eventually, we will be getting the plans back from DCAM for the buildings. And Bob and I thought we would identify where those plans should be kept as far as the public works component goes up at the state hospital. But there's so much up there, and I think I could make a spreadsheet of routine maintenance things like snow plowing, security. We're already working on some security issues up there separately with Christine. But we would work with Christine and Mike on how to keep the place status quo and also just keep things organized as far as grounds and maintenance go.
That'd be great.
Makes
That's
sense.
nice.
Well,
That's really nice, thanks for that idea, that's a great idea, volunteer and help with that.
If there are no questions, could we have a motion to create a
so
Building and
moved that
Grounds
we
Committee?
do as John has suggested.
No, I'll second that.
Any further
Appreciate
discussion?
that.
You'll need to make specific appointments. Probably you ought to get a list of who you'd like to put on it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not your- I would say you probably don't want to go any bigger than 5 to 7 tops.
Because you just want to have
but
a
I-
quick, easy work,
probably-
low-key work.
Sounds like
Better,
it sounds like it's John and Bobby Kennedy and somebody from the fire
Maybe
department
Ed
and
Hinckley,
somebody.
Bill
Ed
suggests.
Hinckley and fire department and police department.
That should do it, don't you
Can
think
you just give
so?
us maybe a recommendation?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk with the chief, both chiefs, and
That'd be good, then we can just have a
All those in
follow-up.
favor of creating the Medfield State Hospital Building and Grounds Committee as laid out?
No,
Thank you.
Maybe just ask John to be the temporary chair until they do meet.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think
Find your other
Chris-
members, please, and report back to us.
Thank you.
Chris has done a
You know-
lot of work on getting prices and that stuff too. Yeah, but she might be.
Yeah, I
able
thought
to
we
do
could
it.
help in that respect too, Mike, is understanding the costs around the maintenance piece.
Yeah.
Put together some numbers
Yeah.
and keep track of those.
So before I became a selectman, I was running up at the hospital, and I was on the, by the Odyssey South House side, and the water was just bubbling out of
Right. Well, I have
a
the,
manhole or out of the ground,
plans.
basically, and I remember I called the water department and
Right,
said,
I
thank
know
you,
which
losing a
drain
lot
that
of water.
was. I have the plans from DCAM, but I also had made notes while I was in Shirk on what DCAM was doing to close down some of the beehives and some of the structures out there, because they were effectively taking that out of the water that flows down to the sewer treatment plant. They went through a decommissioning, they hired an engineering firm to do a study. So I kept a sort of written notes on a plan of all the waterways, the sewer lines coming out of the buildings. And John O'Donnell has offered to continue his relationship with the town. I know Carol may not stay as a commissioner of DCAM, but John will stay as the licensed site professional for DCAM, and he knows a lot about the infrastructure.
I thought that they did, as part of the closure, that they had closed up and filled all of those drains.
They did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they did it in different ways. Some of them were capped, others were filled. But he's very knowledgeable, and he also knows who in the state has worked on the state hospital property in the past. I met on one of our tours, we met one of the persons that was responsible for the properties, probably before 2003, very knowledgeable about the buildings and grounds.
There wasn't Tony Kayla, was it?
No, it wasn't Tony. He's still around too. This was a person that
From the
worked for the
state,
state.
from the state.
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember didn't he get transferred to Westboro or something?
He got
or-
transferred somewhere to Taunton, I think.
Taunton, was it? Yeah.
So you mentioned the plans, that we don't have the plans yet? I thought
No,
they were in
they're-
the building up at the hospital.
Yeah, they've been sent to Westboro. They're copying them, they're gonna give them back to us.
Oh,
John's
okay.
gonna be our conduit to make sure that John O'Donnell will be our conduit to make sure we get all those plans back.
Do we know where the keys to the hospital are at this point, Mike?
I think they've all been sealed up so that you
Yeah,
can't.
security has them, but we will be the keeper of where the keys are, who has keys,
Yeah.
the maps of the building.
I mean, we really should do an inventory of what's in the buildings.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
think.
there's quite a bit in them.
The other thing about these drawings that's good
Just use-
is that once we get these drawings back, they could be part of any developer package. And Sarah's already starting to put together some items to get ready for Phase 3 for the developer bid packages. So we have the MIPA, which was the Massachusetts, the environmental impact report that was
Yeah.
done for the property. Originally, there were conditions that were called out there, like making sure that everything was closed off. There's issues about wastewater and stormwater. All of that information can be put together in a package along with all of the closure information and any building condition
Yeah, so they
information as
don't
well.
have to
So-
reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Yeah.
So rather than just copying the plans, is DCAM going to scan them, so we'll have digital?
Yes, yes, they're gonna scan them onto CDs for us, but give us the paper back. A
Excellent.
copy of the paper plans too, so we'll have access to them, so will developers, as Bill said.
Incidentally, there's an article that I put on the warrant that people ought to take a look at in connection with this and decide whether you want to keep it on there or not.
Maintenance of security, 25?
No, it's.
Oh, 26, the surplus
26.
property.
Yeah, let me read it to you so you guys will be aware of it.
You gave us authority to sell them.
Sell the
Old
stuff. Sell
Yeah,
it.
I thought that
see
was
if the-
okay.
See if the town will authorize the board of selectmen to sell, trade, or otherwise convey surplus and/or obsolete equipment, furnishings, supplies, but not buildings or land located on the grounds or in the buildings at the former state hospital site, provided any funds received by the town from such transaction be deposited in a special state hospital maintenance and security stabilization fund that's provided in MGL Chapter 40, Section 5B, to be used to maintain and secure the property until such time as a determination and a disposition of the property is made. I did that because I kept getting emails from some woman from Peabody who said she works with her partner who grew up in Medfield, and they're trying to salvage architectural details from state buildings.
Right.
And they wanted permission to go in and inventory the property and remove it. And I said, I wrote back and I said, first of all, we don't have authority to dispose of that property, but It occurred to me that there are probably things in those buildings, if you don't sell them, you're gonna have to pay to get rid of them. If you keep them there for years, and that somebody ought to go through and say, well, you know, we could probably get some money for selling these, and we're not gonna use it anyway.
Yeah, for instance, in some of the lavatories, they're separated by 1-inch Carrara Italian marble.
Oh, yes.
So, that's quite expensive material. But in those days, it wasn't. They just used it
Yeah.
between the lavatory stalls, and things like that.
It wouldn't hurt to know what's there, because if nothing else, if you didn't sell it and you left it there,
Somebody else would sell it.
when you demolish the building, I mean, you would, if you knew what it was worth, I mean, you could
Yeah.
offset some of your demolition costs by because that's what they did in Worcester when they took, the bricks, for example, were used as,
Yes,
to offset the demolition costs. So if nothing else, knowing what's there would be of great help.
And that might be something this committee, maintenance committee, could take a look at too, and sort of do some sort of
So,
inventory.
John, I had understood you to say that there were actually pallets of marble, but the marble that you're talking about is in the
It's
lavatories?
still in some of the,
It's actually installed.
what I saw was down at the maintenance building. Now, I don't know if DCAM has taken that out, but
I'm going to take that.
I don't know if they did take it or whether it's still there.
Their argument was that it come from other hospital and it was being stored.
Yeah, that's
stored
possible.
there, so
You know, once they sell it, it's ours, technically.
Yeah, so it should
They
probably.
probably still have keys, although, don't they?
I'm not sure.
You know, I believe that chiefs have the building doors blocked up, so
Oh, that's right.
maybe the
They-
keys
they-
aren't gonna
Yeah,
work.
these
Yeah,
aren't
it
gonna
doesn't
work
matter
that
if you
well.
have keys.
Only to the garage, because they're storing chemicals. The only key they should have, or access to any of the buildings that they should even need, is in the old garage, because that's where they're storing the chemicals for the remediation of the CBOC plumes. So in fact, we gave them permission to keep the stuff there, so.
We did posit that question to John O'Donnell. John said, we don't want it. It's yours. Categorically. To my surprise, Ron. I thought they'd go through it and take out some obviously valuable material, but they didn't.
It'd be interesting if you could use some of that stuff for the park they're talking about out
Yeah,
here, you know?
sure.
They're talking about a fountain, wouldn't it be nice
They're
to?
using the granite block. They've proposed to use the granite blocks at the top of the promontory and the overlook. And Richard, I think, was with me when we met with Ron Griffin, and we looked at some preliminary plans, and they were going to use the granite for benches up there at the top of the promontory, and at the same time have the Veterans Memorials interspaced there. So that's one of the alternatives that they're looking at for those granite pieces.
Well, and with a committee set up, it allows me to talk to DCAM in an official capacity, so that John can converse with us about what.
Great.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Mike, anything else, or are we done?
I think happy Groundhog Day.
An official vote to
Oh,
close.
To close the meeting.
No,
close the warrant.
Meeting, yeah.
I move that we close the warrant for the 2015 annual town meeting.
You need to vote to open the warrant for the special town meeting.
They
We
did
did
that
that.
earlier.
Yep, so I'll second that.
All in favor?
Yep. Thank you.
And now we're adjourned.
This program was made possible through the generous support of your Medfield friends and neighbors, folks just like you. And thanks for watching.